Every once in a while.
Yeah, we're gonna get you one of those inflatable things.
Yeah, that's the most excited I've seen you guys ever. So welcome back, everyone, to the podcast. I am John. John, how are you? I'm great. Thanks for asking, John. Next to me on my screen is our good friend, Brad. Brad, how are you today, brother?
Oh, I'm just fine. Thank you.
Bobblehead Brad. Oh, there it is. Bobblehead Brad.
There you go.
And Tom, take me out to the ball game, Tarver.
Yep, I'm doing well, and they don't know how much they miss by not being part of the recording. So all the stuff that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. All the pre stuff that's pretty interesting material. But at some point it all gets deleted. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry. It's
no, it doesn't. It's out there on the internet forever. I know you.
The dark internet is where we keep all of the extra almost perfect stuff. So anyway, all right, guys. I know I was reading something yesterday or this morning. I don't remember. It talked about how, getting back to normal. We can never get back to normal because the world is in constant turmoil.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've talked about that a little bit from time to time, whether it's a war going on, whether it's politics, whether it's poverty, whether it's who knows what else. But I'm here to tell you, friends, all is not lost. Latest news from the FCC. Have you heard this? So the FCC moves to block car warranty scam calls.
I don't believe it.
So of all the things that are wrong, we could be that much closer.
Oh man.
I will have to say I won't get half I won't even get a tenth of the calls that I've been getting.
Tom was like, nobody likes me anymore, or what?
Yeah. Nobody's gonna.
How is this? I want to know how this is going to affect the employment and job, ratings, because they're going to lay off a whole bunch of people.
Well, hold on.
A zillion people making those calls.
So this came out just earlier this month. Billions of auto warranty robocalls are coming from a single calling campaign.
Really?
Yes, and they have narrowed this down to a couple of people that have sort of been the spearheads and in charge of everything, and so that's how they're able to assure us that they can cut this down. And then on top of that, they're announcing that the phone companies, if you don't block these, you can be complicit in what they're doing as well.
Good.
So
Good.
So that could be the FCC. They have heard where's it at? I think it was a different one, actually. Of all the things, all the complaints that the FCC has taken in over the last few years about credit card scam, all the stuff, the number one thing was the car extended warranty robocalls.
I have one that's even bigger than that, and that's phone spoofing.
Tell us what that is.
Well, that's when you get a phone or you get a call, and on your phone, the caller ID gives you a legitimate name, but the people who are calling you are not that people.
Oh,
they have cloned somebody's phone number, and the people whose number is being cloned don't even know it, and they're calling, and then all of a sudden it's a robocall or a sales call or some sort of that to me is the most annoying thing in the world, because what good does caller ID do if they're spoofing the caller ID?
There's always a way around it.
Right? There is. It's just never ending. So, but I don't know who to talk to about my 1999 Ford F-350 with 600,000 miles on it. I want a warranty on it. Clutch is about to go out.
Who's going to call me now?
I know, right? And I'm going to have to fix the dang thing myself,
Yeah. So how do you know then, like if you're getting these calls from someone who's not who they say, how do you know who you're really talking to?
That's just it. Unless you answer them. I mean, I don't answer the phone calls from numbers that I don't recognize, and just let it go to voicemail. And then if it is a robocall, then I'll block the number. But it's very annoying to get 5 calls a day from the same group, but it's 5 different numbers.
Yeah,
there's something wrong with that. And that technology ought to be banned if it isn't already. But there's no way to track it because they dump the number, they dump it right after they've used it.
As churches more and more were getting online, years ago,
Right.
where they took that serious. Oh, we need a website. One of the common practices I would see is that pastors would put their cell phone numbers on there, and I would try to encourage, don't do that. I know why you're doing it. Don't do that. Not on the internet, because
Right.
it's easy enough to find.
Right.
You don't need to make it that much easier. I don't even put it on church like bulletin and stuff. I'm kind of leery of that. It's silly, but anyway. So there's your bit of good news, people. Unless you're like Tom, who was hoping to get a few of those extra.
It's gonna get really lonely.
Now nobody calls anymore.
Don't worry. I'll call you this afternoon, Tom, and I'll
There you
say,
go.
hey,
Car.
tell me about your car's warranty.
That's right.
All right. So, gentlemen, the church has a lot that it needs to figure out, would you say? It has a lot that it needs to deal with. Particular churches like ours, United Methodist Church, is dealing with some pretty difficult circumstances that have been going on for decades, but seem to be coming to a sort of peak of what's the word? I don't know. It's going pretty bad, pretty badly, right? So if I were to ask you, what skill should church leaders be developing right now? What skills should those in the church be trying to get in order to face all these kinds of difficulties? What are some of those skills you would say we should be promoting and teaching?
Well, goodness, you've already primed the pump on that one because of what you said. But coming back to I just had a conversation this morning with a friend, and they're studying Andy. The men's group at that church are studying Not In It to Win It by Andy Stanley. And when we were talking about how when he decided to not meet during the COVID, the COVID era, which I guess hasn't ended yet, but anyway, and how people definitely politicized that. It was like you're anti-Republican, anti-conservative, you're against Trump, all the stuff that came out and the decision to go on CNN was, and not Fox. Why didn't you go on Fox? And the simple answer, straightforward answer was, well, they didn't ask. But people got upset, and the thing that you sent us and we read, it talks about how within the context of the church, all of a sudden, and as somebody put it, we start with our political position, and then we shape the gospel around it, rather than the other way around. We start with the gospel and shape our life positions around it. But coming back to, especially we as United Methodists, we're just kind of waiting for that day when we are no longer United Methodists, whatever we become next. And that article talked about developing the art of deep listening, actually, and how that is difficult to achieve, because we're forming our answer as I'm listening to your answer. I'm formulating my response, or I'm listening to your answer and something in me reacts to not what you said, but how I feel about that before you say anything. So listening.
Okay, so you're saying listening. Oh, I thought maybe, better barbecue skills is what we were going to lead with.
That's where I was
Grilling,
going to go.
yeah.
Grilling, yeah.
Tom went off the deep end here with this. I quit listening to him after a while.
Well, I'm gonna say, I'm just cutting to the chase, boys.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Yeah. So the religion news service put out an article a couple weeks ago, last week. The title is "As Politics Poison Churches, a Nonprofit is Teaching a New Skill: Deep Listening." Now, new skill. I mean, people have been listening for a long time, but more and more it just feels like we've just gotten worse and worse at it, right? That in fact, we're actually not listening to each other. Right. Last week, we talked about transformative travel. You remember that?
Mhm.
This week, the term is transformative mediation. So this is a nonprofit organization called Resetting the Table. And their work is to get different groups, not just churches, but, we focus on church life here. And so they work with churches and they work with other organizations, other different fields of work with the goal of teaching people how to listen, how to engage with other people, not so much so that you can get your point across or that you can, convince someone of your opinion, but so that everybody does actually get heard. And they even say it here in the article, their goal is not to, they're not trying to resolve conflict. They're not saying you come to our sessions and you're going to learn how to resolve everything you're going through and everything's going to be fine. Everybody's going to agree. That's not the point. The point is learning how to listen deeply to one another. So, Brad, I was thinking about that. Like, we're not good at that. We're not good at doing something that we don't think can give us like an immediate result, right? So if the point isn't to like win an argument or to settle a debate or a dispute, then what is the point of learning how to listen to each other?
Well, I think one of the big things the article said that was just kind of tucked into the piece somewhere is that oftentimes, Tom said it earlier. He says oftentimes we listen for the point of trying to come back at, or to respond to reply to, or to try to argue against. And the one thing that was tucked away in that article very, very carefully was this notion that people truly feel appreciated when they are understood, not when you agree with them, but when they're understood. And so this mediative listening, or this listening practice they're talking about. I remember going to classes about this, I don't know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago or so. And it was all about how do we listen to understand, not listen to respond, and to listen with the intention of trying to comprehend what you're saying. I want to know where you're coming from. And I'm going to respond back to you and ask you, am I hearing you correctly? And if I'm not, tell me where I'm missing the boat. And if I am, great. Now let's move forward with the conversation. More often than not, we're not even hearing the whole side of the conversation that's coming to us. We talk at each other instead of with each other. And we don't listen to each other. And I think that's a big part. I think the biggest thing that's missing here is listening to understand, and with the purposes of understanding. I may not agree with you even after we're done, but I want to know where you're coming from, because in doing that, and this is what the article said, and it was that little piece tucked away, is people feel validated. You know what I mean? When I say something to you and then you say it back to me, not to cross-examine or not to disagree with or to debate about, but you say it back to me to say, am I hearing you right?
Right. I heard.
Am I hearing what you're saying? Am I understanding what you're saying? Tell me if I'm getting it. I mean, that whole thing there it shifts the conversation from antagonistic to comprehension and to understanding. And I think when I hear that you're trying to hear me, I feel validated. I feel like we're actually conversing.
Here's a line I think probably
Yeah.
it leads to that. The techniques they teach are meant to allow people with deep differences to see each other in all their humanity.
That's it. I mean, that's the part that was truly there. There's, and ironically, I was looking at all the comments below the article, and that is exactly the opposite of what they're.
Brad, never read the comments.
Yeah, I know.
Brad.
It's like, oh, really, man? Nobody
That
got
is
it here. I got it.
internet.
They didn't
That
get
is
it.
internet 101, man.
I know, right? So,
So what makes it hard, Tom, to listen to each other? I know Brad kind of said some things, but what makes it so hard?
Well, I was thinking sometimes I'm thinking in relation to when I speak with Ellen, my wife, and the times it's hard to hear her is because something's going on inside of me, and the little boy is in control. The hurt kid, the disappointed kid, the whatever you want to call that happens inside of our hearts and inside of our heads, where I can't hear you because there's somebody inside of me speaking with a louder voice.
Wow.
And so and so there's this response on my part that says I need to quiet that. Well, first of all, I need to acknowledge that part of me. I need to give that, let's say, the little kid. I need to say, I know you're there. So I need to acknowledge me and what's going on inside of me, right. And then I can set that that aside and say, okay, now I'm ready to listen to you. And so that's usually that's what's going on in our passionate responses against whatever. Is something about me feels a sense of lack, and I'm trying to fill that before I can hear you.
I think the line that I was talking about is exactly what Tom's talking about here. And it was that quote that came from E.L. Rabinovich. One of the greatest insights from the world of trauma therapy is that people are their most receptive selves when they are seen as they wish to be seen. She said, we want people to say, yes, that's exactly me. That makes all the difference in producing receptivity. Lots of changes can happen in those moments. It's the idea of knowing that I have been heard.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with me, but you've heard me, and I know you've heard me. I get it. And I hear you trying. And that's important, That's what I think is missing a lot of times in our conversations. But you're exactly right. If I don't put myself aside, I found that practice really helpful when someone comes to my office and needs to talk, is whatever is on my desk, I fold it up and I shove it aside and I clear off my desk, and I'm fully present with that person, or at least I try to be. And I know that there are times when I am struggling with that myself, that this is something I've got to get done because it's driving me crazy and I can't help. But I find if I push that all aside, people are more receptive. Yeah, like this podcast, I've
got to get this over with.
But yeah.
So you use that line talking about trauma, Brad, and then Tom, you're talking about this inner voice. I mean, so then part of what makes it so difficult is, there are more than one conversations going on.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
In all of us. And so who are you listening? Who are you actually listening to or giving your attention to? If it's, whatever conversation happening in your own mind and heart, as opposed to, right, who you're listening there. But the point of this is, well, that inner voice that you're dealing with, that voice needs to be heard just as much. Right. And so that's hard.
Yeah. Well, it remind and it's certainly part of that is the news feed that we listen to or watch or anything. But it reminds me, and I think I've shared this story before, but I don't think I've shared it in this context podcast about you all are familiar, but for those who are maybe watching and listening, the three, our parents, our
That lucky
Yeah.
devil just stumbled.
Hi,
across
Mom.
us. Yeah, right.
But we have that in the process of becoming a United Methodist elder, a United Methodist pastor, fully ordained, and all of that. We have that interview. We have several interviews, but one of them is on the I think it's the conference level with the Board of Ordained Ministry, and I was going through that process at the same time as Jason Fry, a good friend of ours, was going through that. And this was up in Austin, and I remember Jason went in first. He comes out, and then there's that pause, that as they discuss in there the last interviewee before the next interviewee, and I was the next. Well, of course, Jason comes out, and he debriefs in front of me, and by the time he's finished debriefing, by the time I go in there, Tom did not go in there. Tom and Jason went in there, and so my responses were based on what Jason may have said, or how Jason would have put it. And I remember when I came out, the recommendation is I have a psych evaluation, which was a right response because I was crazy in there. I wasn't me. I was me and the last conversation I had. And that's what happens when we come to a table. We've got, again, as you said earlier, John, those additional voices. Yeah. And we're responding to those voices. And we aren't even, it's not even the real us. So it comes back to, and I'm glad you brought it up, Brad, that I want the real me to show up in the real conversation so that you see me. Right. And when I hear the feedback, yes, you've heard me, not me and.
Right. Because we bring so much to us, libraries and stuff. Everything that we've ever heard, everything we've ever read, everything we've ever seen, everything we've ever experienced is part of our baggage. It fuels and makes us up. It's like the atomic elements that make us who we are. And of course, we all could see the same thing, but we all see it differently. And it's because of our perspectives and our experiences and stuff. All of that is coming to the table every time that we meet with someone. The question is, what are we going to filter out? I think that was the biggest question. Tom, you started this whole thing with, we look at politics and that becomes our filter. Yeah. And the question is, what real filter do we want to have as the filter through which we see everyone? And I think as Christians, this is Brad speaking, but my opinion is, as Christians, I think our filter should be Jesus. Right. Just saying, that we see the other as the way Jesus was.
Time out.
What I hear you saying is, no, go ahead, Brad.
I mean, you want us to be Christ-like, Brad. I don't know what to do with you, man.
It's in my resume. I can't help it. Trying to be Christ-like, and God knows how trying I am. Anyway.
That the people of God say, no, okay. So here's a question: how do we know if we are truly listening to someone else?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. What? I think when we begin to see the other, right, and really truly try to understand. And not try to respond for the sake of responding so that I can make my point in the midst of the conversation. I mean, to hear and see the other first and know that their experiences are valid. May not be my experiences, but to them, they're valid. That's grace, I think. That's mercy. Every time we read that in scripture, Jesus encountered somebody, he looked upon them with compassion, or he looked upon them with love, and or he was moved with pity. He was moved to tears. He was moved. Christ experienced the other where the other is, and I think that's part of what I'm called to do. I
sent this link to y'all yesterday. I heard a song Saturday during batting practice. You know, baseball Tom was at a baseball game before the baseball game started, and it was called My Church, and it's the simple response or the story behind the song is this person may have messed up, may have done some terrible things, but the moment she gets into her car and turns up the radio and listens to certain music, then she feels her sins washed away and she has a revival moment. And it's called My Church because I guess this is my church. You know, the radio, the FM radio, and listening to Hank and Johnny Cash. But Ellen and I were, were listening to it on the way back from church yesterday, and having her listen with me and hearing the whole thing, not just blaring over the stadium. There's some things I missed, but her listening to it and us talking about it, there was this aha moment. Oh, I get it now. And the light bulb just came on. And I think there is this in our relationship, in a conversation, there is this moment where you're trying to understand, you don't quite get it, and something is said, and finally you make that connection and you go, oh, I hear you, I understand you, and you can almost see it in the facial response of the other person that, yes, he hears me. Yes, she understands, she gets me. And that's a wonderful moment, no matter which side of that conversation you're on, where you're the one who goes, I get you, or you get me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I wonder if we struggle with this kind of listening is a lot of us don't do silence very well, right? Every once in a while in church, during prayer time, I'll say, we're going to pray in silence. And I mean, that minute feels like eternity, right? Like, when is he going to start again? So we're just uncomfortable with that. And I think part of learning how to listen deeply, like we're talking about, is, okay, Tom, you just said something that is meaningful to you. Brad, you sharing part of your experience. And just like you both said in different ways, like, instead of me saying, okay, now let me tell you what I think, or let me tell you my experience, let me tell you what that makes me think about me. Instead, let me sit with that for a second. Right? Mm-hmm. And it may be quiet. Mm-hmm. And you may be wondering, what in the world is he thinking? But, I'm just kind of take that all in. And I don't know, that's quite uncomfortable, I think, for a lot this.
Yeah, we're not used to that kind of stuff. That's hard work.
It is. Really hard work. It is. I think the first time I learned this, the extent of how important it is, was working with Kairos. If you're familiar with the Emmaus community, other kind of spiritual walks like that, the Kairos walk is that sort of model, but in the prison system. So you go in for a few days with a group of, in our case, group of guys, and you teach Jesus. And you have this experience of grace and everything else. But a lot of times, what we don't realize is there's actually a follow-up weekend, right? And in the follow-up weekend, we say, all right, all that stuff we talked about last week, like, it still matters. It wasn't just something that was a part of that and now it's over. And one of the most important things that they go through in a follow-up weekend with these, we call them brothers in white, is that, all right, we learn how to sit down with each other. And the theme is always listen, love. Right? How do you love? Well, you listen. How do you listen? Well, you listen with love, right? So listen, love. And we go through like role-playing scenarios where I'm going to sit down with you because we're going to talk about our faith right now. We're going to talk about something that, is on our hearts, whatever. And I've got to learn to just sit here and listen, love. And, we may think that's hard, but a lot of these guys who are in jail, they find it that's kind of letting yourself be vulnerable. And that is a dangerous thing for them to do. But we also have our fears with that as well. And that is a part of underlying part of all this, I think, is that vulnerability that I may not get a chance to say everything I want to say. But if I'm listening to you and letting you do that, Brad, you use the word grace. I mean, that's what it is, right? So I just have to trust that maybe next time I will, right?
Mhm.
Or maybe that's a part of our conversation next time that, hey, you didn't give me, I don't know. So all that to say is, man, it's not just a one and done thing either, right? This
It's
is
an
ongoing, right?
It's a conversation. Yeah.
We have to trust each other enough to keep on with these kinds of conversations and whatnot. So, Tom, I mean, where do we go with that? Why is, I guess we can probably make our assumptions why, but as far as church ministry, why is this something that we need to make a priority?
Well, and this kind of goes back to what Brad said. It really comes down to my relationship with Jesus Christ. I mean, you've got to start with that reality. And if I'm gonna say I am a follower of Jesus Christ, then that means I'm going to let Jesus take the lead.
Mhm.
And where will I find Jesus taking the lead, or where can I sit at Jesus' feet? Which is which is a term of just saying, I'm going to sit and listen and learn. And I see that in the Gospels, and what do we see Jesus doing? And I just think of, the first thing that comes to my mind is when parents brought their kids to Rabbi Jesus to be blessed by him, and one, Jesus saw them and made time for them, and his disciples' response was to try to shoo him away. This, don't bother the master, and all of that. And so Jesus did the clearing the desk moment.
Yeah.
And he sat there, and if you've ever been around somebody, and I've seen this again, a lot of my illustrations come from the ballpark because I'm there, and I remember this one player saying, he wouldn't sign anything before the game. I mean, he says after the game, and a lot of times that's just a way to blow people off. But after the game, and I purposely went and waited because I wanted to see if he kept his word. He did, and there's lots of kids, and he was there the whole time with each individual kid. He was there, looking at the kid, listening what the kid had to say. And there were probably 20 kids after the game. And he took his time. And to me, that's Jesus. He stops, he looks, he listens. And so as a follower of Jesus, I want to stop. I want to look, and I want to listen. Love.
Amen. All right. Well, there it is. I mean, if anybody's going to lead the way, why shouldn't it be the church, right? If Christ is our example, and if we are to take on the same mind that was in Christ Jesus, then why can't the church lead the way with everything going on the way it is? I mean, it's a crazy world out there, man, and people are just things people are saying, and I'm convinced that a lot of the ways that some political figures and news outlets and even celebrity, the way they sort of kind of push people, like they're instigating so much of this because it benefits them, and we're just letting them, and we're letting them take away that ability to actually listen to each other, so that we can actually like live in peace, right? And all the while they're getting rich, but that's something else. But anyway, all right,
I think
Brad-
that's something for another episode is to, all right, which things do we filter out? You know, which voices are we going to filter out because they're not productive, they're not Christ-like, and they certainly aren't interested in us listening to them for the sake of them being heard. They're interested in their own publicity.
Right.
And at what point in time do we stop listening to that influence? Those are the filters that I think we need to be aware of.
And maybe even, not just stop listening, but stop entertaining the idea that they really care.
Right. Exactly.
But that's something that's all right. So we're glad you listened to the podcast or watched and listened. It's been great. It's right.
I'm still there.
We
Yeah.
love the fact that you did.
That's right. You listened, and we loved to have you. So, all right, we want to hear what you got to say. This is important for us. How have you experienced the power of this kind of listening in your ministry at church, or maybe in your family? We want to hear those testimonies and how we can, and where in the church today we need to learn this so that we can move forward in a Christ-like and in a faithful way. So Brad and Tom, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I always appreciate that you guys are so much smarter than me, and we always have a good time. And thanks for tuning in. Find the websites. Bobblehead Brad says goodbye. Tom, take me out to the ball game, says goodbye, and we will see you next week. God be with you.
Yeah.
God bless.
Peace out. Thanks, John.